Emily arrived in Oregon on a quiet winter afternoon, her suitcase still covered in airport dust, her heart heavy from months of grief. The moment she stepped inside her childhood home, she felt the silence hit her like a wave. It wasn't just the absence of sound, it was the absence of her mother. Every room held a memory. Every corner felt like it was waiting for someone who would never return. Emily had prepared herself for this moment, yet nothing truly prepared her for what it felt like to walk into a house that suddenly belonged to the past. Her stepdad, Michael, greeted her at the doorway. He looked older, not in appearance, but in spirit. His shoulders seemed lower, his voice softer, and his smile felt like something he had to lift with effort. They hugged in a quiet, respectful way to people who had lost the same person but grieved her differently. Emily noticed how his hand trembled slightly as he held the door open for her. But he quickly tucked it into his pocket as if he didn't want her to see how shaken he still was. They made tea in silence. Not because they didn't want to talk, but because they didn't know where to start. The kitchen still smelled faintly like lavender soap, the kind her mother loved. Emily kept her eyes on the floor, noticing the tiny scratch on the wooden cabinets her mom had once laughed about. Now that memory felt like a fragile bubble. It's too delicate to touch. When they sat at the old kitchen table, Emily sensed that Michael had something on his mind. He kept clearing his throat, trying to speak, then stopping again. She waited, unsure if he needed time or courage. Finally, he whispered, "There's something I want to talk to you about." The tone of his voice made her look up immediately. He wasn't nervous, he was struggling. His eyes glistened with an emotion he couldn't quite hide. He reached into his pocket and placed a small worn-out key on the table. Emily recognized it instantly. It was her mother's studio, Keitha, one that opened the door to the room her mother treated like a sanctuary. A place filled with her paintings, her notebooks, her unfinished dreams. A place Emily hadn't entered since the funeral. Michael gently pushed the key toward her. "I want you to take the studio," he said quietly. "Everything inside it." "She wanted you to have it one day?" Emily's breath caught. This wasn't what she expected. She thought he needed help with bills or boxes or something simple. Instead, he was giving her the most personal part of her mother's life. It felt overwhelming, touching, and heavy, all at the same time. But before she could speak, Nico continued. He looked away, as if gathering courage to say something harder. "And, Emily, I don't want this house to stay empty." His voice cracked just slightly. "I know you have your own life, your own place, your own work. But could you stay for a while? Not forever, just some time." "I don't want to be here alone yet." Emily felt stunned. The request was unexpected, yet it didn't feel inappropriate or strange. It felt honest. This house held years of memories for both of them. He wasn't asking out of convenience. He was asking out of loneliness, out of fear of facing silence that reminded him of the woman he lost. She looked around the kitchen, the chair her mom always sat in, the window she cleaned every Sunday morning, the plants she watered even though she forgot most chores. Everything felt frozen in time. Emily wanted to answer, but her voice refused to come. Part of her wanted to run back to her own apartment and escape the weight of all this sadness. But another part of her felt something else, something she wasn't ready to name. Something about Michael's quiet sincerity made her feel responsible in a strangely gentle way. Like their grief connected them more than she realized. Before she could even find words, the wind outside pushed against the house. The lights flickered for a moment, making the room dim. The small shift added tension to the moment, making the silence louder. Michael noticed her hesitation and immediately sat back, placing his hands together. "I'm not asking for anything difficult," he said. "Just company. Someone to talk to sometimes, someone to sit with at dinner so the chair across from me doesn't stay empty every night." Emily swallowed hard. She didn't want to disappoint him. She also didn't want to make a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. He added gently, "Your mom loved you more than anything. She always said you were her comfort. I guess I'm hoping you can help this place feel alive again." Those Words broke something open in her. Not in a painful way more, in a way that reminded her she wasn't the only one carrying grief. Michael had lost a wife. She had lost a mother. And now they were two people trying to figure out how to keep. Living in a world that felt quieter and colder without her, Emily reached out and touched the key. It felt cold in her hand, almost symbolic. She knew opening that studio would bring back emotions she'd been avoiding, memories she wasn't sure she was ready to face. But maybe that was exactly why she needed to do it. When she finally spoke, her voice was small. "I'll stay for a while." Michael closed his eyes briefly, as if someone had lifted a heavy burden from him. "Thank you," he whispered. Not loudly, but with gratitude so genuine it made Emily's throat tighten. She wasn't sure what she was stepping into. She didn't know how long she would stay or what memories might rise to the surface. She knew this. She couldn't leave. Him alone in a house that felt like a reminder of everything he lost. And deep down she realized that staying might be the only way she could face her own grief. The wind outside settled. The lights steadied, and something quietly shifted between them. Something not romantic, not complicated, just deeply human. Something that would soon change everything in ways neither of them expected. The days after Emily decided to stay moved quickly, almost too quickly for her to process. She woke up early, helped Michael organize the house, and spent long afternoons sorting through boxes her mother had left behind. Every drawer held a memory. Every folded sweater reminded her of a laugh or a moment she wished she could relive. But she pushed forward, trying to keep her heart steady. Michael stayed busy too. He fixed small things around the house, cooked simple meals, and tried to keep the atmosphere light. Sometimes he talked, sometimes he stayed quiet, but he always carried a certain gentleness that made the house feel less heavy. They were two people trying to help each other without needing to say much. One evening, rain began hitting the windows. Hard. The sky turned dark earlier than usual and thunder echoed through the hills. Emily found Michael in the living room, sitting on the floor beside a small box of photographs. He didn't hear her come in at first. He was staring at a picture of her mother, smiling so brightly it almost hurt to look at. He let out a quiet sigh, one that came from deep inside. "She changed my whole world," he whispered to himself, not realizing Emily was behind him. She stepped closer. "I miss her too," she said gently. When he looked up at her, she noticed the tired sadness in his eyes. Not dramatic, not overwhelming, just the kind that grows slowly inside a person who hasn't had anyone to talk to for too long. He set the photo down carefully. "I'm sorry you had to come back here for this," he said. "I know you had a life out there. I never wanted you to carry this weight." Emily shook her head. "It's not a weight. It's my family." And it was true. Even though she was hurting, being in the house felt right in a strange way. Like her mother's presence was still guiding both of them, telling them to take care of each other. In the following days, small routines began forming between them. They shared breakfast at the same table every morning. Michael made coffee. Emily made toast. They didn't plan, it did just happen. She noticed how he tried to keep things comfortable for her, giving her space, but also making sure she didn't feel alone. At night, they'd sit near the fireplace. Sometimes they talked about her mother's stories, or how she would always burn cookies but pretend it was extra flavor. Sometimes they talked about simple things like weather, music, or Emily's job back in Seattle. And other nights they just sat quietly, listening to the crackling fire. Connected by silence that didn't feel awkward at all, slowly, without either of them trying, the distance between them softened. Not in a romantic or dramatic way, just in a way that people grow close when they go through something painful together. Then, one afternoon, Emily found herself standing in front of the studio door once again. She had avoided opening it since she arrived. Something inside her was scared of what she would feel. But now, with Michael in the backyard fixing a loose fence, she felt ready to face it. The door creaked softly as she pushed it open. Sunlight, From the small window, lit up dust particles floating in the air. The room looked untouched, brushes still in their jars. Half-finished sketches on the table. Notebooks stacked neatly like her mother had planned to come back the next morning. Emily stepped inside and felt her throat tighten. She ran her fingers over her mother's paint palette. The colors were dried, but they still held warmth in her memory. She moved toward the desk where her mother wrote her ideas. And that was when she saw it, a sealed envelope with her name, written in familiar handwriting. Her heart pounded. She picked it up with both hands, afraid she might drop it. It felt light, but the moment felt heavy. She opened it slowly. Inside was a letter her mother had written before she passed. Emily began reading, her eyes moving quickly over the page. Her mother talked about her love for her, about how proud she was of the woman Emily had become. She wrote about Michael too, how he had been her rock, how she worried he would lose himself in loneliness when she was gone. And then came the part that made Emily stop breathing. Her mother wrote, "You and Michael understand each other more than you realize. You both carry your hearts quietly. Don't shut the world out. Don't let grief separate you. Take care of each other." Emily stood still, the paper trembling in her hands. She didn't know exactly what her mother meant, whether it was comfort, support, or simply companionship. But she knew this letter was her mother's final hope, that neither of them would face the world alone. Just then, she heard footsteps behind her. Michael appeared in the doorway, wiping dirt from his hands. His expression changed when he saw her face. "Emily, what's wrong?" Without speaking, she handed him the letter. He read it slowly. His eyes softened, widened, then lowered. He held the letter carefully, as if afraid it would tear. When he finished, he sat down on the small wooden chair by the desk, taking a deep breath. "She always knew what we needed before we did," he said with a sad smile. Emily sat beside him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Their grief felt shared, connected, almost synchronized. Michael looked at her gently. "I don't want you to ever think I expect anything from you," he said quietly. "You're here because you chose to be, and that's enough." His words eased something in her chest. He wasn't asking for comfort or closeness. He wasn't trying to fill a space that belonged to her mother. He was simply being honest, open in a way he hadn't been since the funeral, for the first time. Emily saw him not as her stepdad, not as the man her mother married, but as someone carrying deep loneliness. Trying his best to stay standing, she wanted to say something back, something reassuring. But before she could speak, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. Michael and Emily exchanged confused looks. They weren't expecting anyone. Emily stood up, still holding part of the letter. Michael followed her down the hallway, both of them feeling a sudden shift in the air. When she opened the door, everything changed in an instant. Someone she hadn't expected to see was standing right there, and the peaceful rhythm it slowly built was about to be shaken in a way neither of them saw coming. The moment Emily opened the door, the cold air rushed in. Along with a face she hadn't seen in months, her biological father, Daniel. He stood there wearing a dark coat, holding an umbrella dripping with rain. His expression looked tense, worried, almost guilty. Emily felt her heart jolt. She wasn't ready for this. Daniel spoke first, his voice firm but tired. "Emily, I need to talk to you. It's important." Michael stepped back, giving them space. He didn't interrupt. He simply nodded politely, then walked toward the living room, letting Emily decide how to handle the unexpected visit. Daniel stepped inside, shaking off the rain. "You didn't answer my calls," he said, his tone mixed with concern and frustration. Emily crossed her arms tightly. "I've been busy. Mom's things, the house, everything." She didn't say it with anger, only exhaustion. He looked around, noticing the familiar furniture, the photos, the warmth of the home. His eyes landed briefly on the family picture on the wall, one with Emily, her mom, and Michael. Something in his expression shifted, but he didn't comment. Instead, he sighed. This place holds too many memories. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. Emily frowned. Why? 'Cause you're hurting. This isn't healthy. His words came out sharp, even though he tried to sound gentle. She shook her head. I'm dealing with it. Everyone grieves differently. Daniel seemed frustrated that she wasn't agreeing or leaning on him the way he expected. He paced around the room once, then said, Come stay with me for a while. You need distance. You're too close to everything here. Emily felt a knot tighten in her stomach. Distance wasn't what she needed. She needed closure, understanding, connection, things she found here, not somewhere unfamiliar. Michael stayed quiet in the other room, respecting their conversation but clearly listening, just in case she needed support. Emily spoke calmly. Dad, I'm fine here. I'm helping. I'm healing, and I'm not alone. Daniel's eyebrows pulled together. Not alone, he repeated, his voice tightening slightly. She nodded. Michael has been kind. We're taking care of the house together. He let out a slow exhale, closing his eyes for a moment as if trying to understand. You and Michael are getting close. His tone wasn't accusatory, just confused and uneasy. Emily didn't answer immediately. She didn't know how to explain what was happening, how their shared grief had created a quiet bond. She didn't fully understand yet. It wasn't romance, it wasn't dependence. It was simply two broken hearts finding comfort in the same place. Instead of explaining, she said, We're both just trying to get through this. Mom wanted us to take care of each other. Daniel froze. She said that. Emily hesitated. She hadn't shown him the letter yet. She hadn't even processed all its meaning herself. But something inside her said he needed to understand the truth, not to approve. Just to know, so she went to the studio, grabbed the letter, and handed it to him. He read the first few lines quickly, but then slowed down when he reached the part where her mother wrote about her wish for them to support one another, not drift into loneliness. When he finished, he held the letter for a moment, staring at the handwriting like it belonged to a world he no longer understood. His voice softened. She was always the one who held everything together, he whispered. Emily nodded silently. Daniel took a shaky breath. I didn't know she felt this way. It wasn't angry. He wasn't jealous. He simply looked lost, like a man trying to find his place in a life that moved on without asking him. Emily reached out and put a hand on his arm. Dad, I'm not replacing anyone. Michael isn't replacing anyone. We're just trying to honor her the best we can. Daniel looked down, reflecting on her words. Finally, he nodded. But then he stepped closer and said softly, I still worry about you. This place, it holds too much pain. And you're still so young, you shouldn't carry all this. Emily shook her head again. Pain doesn't go away by running from it. Daniel didn't know how to argue with that, so he tried again, gently. Emily, please come with me, just for a while. She paused, looked toward the studio door, then toward the hallway where Michael stood silently, hands in his pockets, giving her space but offering quiet support with his presence. The answer felt clear. Emily turned back to her father. I'm staying, at least for now. I need to finish what Mom left behind. And I need to be here where she lived, where she laughed, where she loved us. Daniel's shoulders slowly lowered. He accepted the decision even though he didn't fully understand it. He placed the letter back in her hand, his voice low. If you ever need anything, anything at all, call me. She nodded. I will. He hugged her, a gentle, slightly awkward hug that still held care. After that, he left the house quietly, the door closing with a soft thud that echoed through the hall. When Emily turned around, Michael was standing there, not too close, not asking questions, just looking at her with a mixture of relief and gratitude. You didn't have to stay because of me, he said softly. She smiled faintly. I didn't stay because of you. He lowered his head slightly, touched by her words in a way he wasn't expecting. Romantic. Tension, no confusion. just to people choosing not to face their grief alone. The house felt warmer that evening. The studio light glowed softly through the crack in the door. Her mother's presence felt closer than ever, and Emily knew that something in her heart had shifted quietly, gently, but undeniably. Whatever came next, she wasn't running from it anymore. The days after Daniel's visit felt different, calmer, but also filled with a quiet expectation neither Emily nor Michael spoke about. Something had changed. Not in a dramatic or romantic way, but in a deeper emotional sense. They were no longer just sharing the same house. They were sharing the same journey, the same memories, the same hope to heal without falling apart. Emily spent more time in her mother's studio, cleaning it, organizing the shelves, and reading through notebooks filled with unfinished ideas. Each page made her feel closer to her mother, but it also made her realize how much her mother had believed in her. There were notes like, "Emily will finish this one day," or "Show this to Emily when she's ready." These small sentences felt like gentle pushes from the past, guiding her forward. One morning, while she was dusting the window frame, Michael appeared at the door of the studio. He leaned against the wall, watching her silently for a moment before saying, "The room looks alive again." Emily brushed hair away from her face. "It feels good to be here," she replied. "Like she's still talking to me." He nodded. "She'd be happy seeing you take care of her things. She always trusted you with her heart." The words warmed her, even though they made her throat tighten. She walked over to a painting her mother had left unfinished, a landscape of the Oregon coast. Emily touched the edge of the frame, imagining how her mother's hand moved with every stroke. She whispered, "I miss her every minute." Michael stepped closer, not touching her, not crowding her, just being there. "I know," he said. His voice was steady, but she could hear the ache beneath it. Their eyes met for a brief second. Not in a romantic way, but in a way filled with shared understanding. They didn't need to say anything else later that afternoon. They decided to go through the attic, a space both of them had avoided. Emily climbed the narrow stairs, and Michael followed behind her with a flashlight. The attic smelled like old books and cedar wood. Boxes were stacked everywhere, some labeled, some faded with time. They sorted through old holiday decorations, childhood toys, and old clothes her mother had packed away years ago. The work was tiring, but oddly peaceful. Every item they touched held a memory, and each memory felt like a step toward healing. At one point, Emily found a small wooden box with her name carved on top. She opened it slowly. Inside were letters she had written to her mother when she was a child, little notes about school, drawings, birthday cards. Emily let out a soft laugh mixed with tears. Michael smiled gently. "She kept everything you ever gave her." Emily looked down at the old papers. "I didn't know she treasured these so much." "Emily," he said softly, "you are the best part of her life." The sincerity in his voice made Emily's eyes water. She wiped her cheek quickly. "She would be happy you're keeping the house warm," she said. "She always said you hated being alone." Michael chuckled dryly. "Your mother knew me better than I knew myself." They continued sorting until they reached a final box at the back of the attic. When Emily opened it, she gasped. Inside were her mother's journals, years of writings, thoughts, dreams, fears, hopes. Emily held one to her chest, overwhelmed by the weight of so many untold stories. As she kneeled beside the box, Michael crouched down beside her. "You should read them," he encouraged. "She probably wanted you to." Emily nodded, but her voice shook. "I'm scared of what I'll feel." Michael smiled sadly. "Feeling doesn't break you. It helps you stand again." Those words stayed with her long after they finished cleaning. That night, Emily sat by the fireplace with the first journal in her hands. Michael was in the kitchen making tea, giving her space but staying close enough in case she needed him. The room felt warm, cozy, almost safe. When she opened the journal, the first page held a message she wasn't expecting. If Emily ever reads this, it means she has found her way back home. Take care of your heart, my sweet girl. Stronger than you think. Tears slipped down her cheek, silent and soft. She didn't hide them. She didn't need to. Michael walked in moments later, holding 2 cups. When he saw her crying, he set the cups down and sat beside her, not speaking, simply offering presence. Emily whispered through her tears, "How did you live with this pain alone for so long?" He looked at the fire, the flames reflected in his eyes. "I didn't live with it," he said quietly. "I survived it." But surviving isn't the same as living. His honesty caught her off guard. She turned toward him, really seeing him his. Tired eyes, the lines of grief on his face, and the quiet strength he carried. She whispered, "You're not alone anymore." His lips curved into a small, grateful smile. "Neither are you." The room fell into a peaceful silence. Not heavy, not sad, just warm. In the days that followed, Emily and Michael created a new rhythm. They fixed things around the house, cooked meals together, shared stories, laughed at old memories, and slowly rebuilt parts of their lives that grief had broken. Emily finished organizing the studio. Michael rebuilt her mother's garden. The house, which once felt like a museum of loss, began to feel alive again. One evening, as they stood outside watching the sunset, the air cool and soft around them, Michael spoke in a low voice. "Your mother left us both with so much love. We just needed time to find it again." Emily nodded. "We're doing our best." "We are," he agreed. They didn't need anything more than that. No grand promises, no confusing feelings. Just mutual respect, gratitude, and a bond formed through shared healing that night. Emily wrote in her mother's journal for the first time, "Mom, we're taking care of each other. It's just like you wanted." She closed the book gently, feeling peace settle inside her for the first time in months. Michael passed by her room a moment later, giving her a soft smile before heading to bed. The house was quiet, but it was no longer lonely. Emily knew the future would bring new challenges, new days of sadness, new moments of remembering. But she also knew something else. She wasn't facing any of it alone. Not anymore. And that simple truth changed everything.